Morning, Nigel.
Good morning, Gaunty.
Let's get straight to it, shall we? You've been getting a little bit of flack. By the way, nice picture of me and you today in the sun. Have you seen the ad?
Yeah, I have, yeah.
You like that, don't you?
Well,
the old halo round your head. What do you think?
I'm not that happy about the European flag being around me, but...
I think that's good. I think that's good. I think that's Chris Stevens taking the mickey.
Well, that's what I want to escape from, but yeah.
Let's talk about UKIP then. You've been getting a bit of flack recently. When we had Libertas on yesterday, and the leader of Libertas on, and he started off by talking about expenses. There's also this story that's been peddled, and I'm going to put you right on the spot today. The BNP, I've been getting loads of emails about it. They said that you said on a TV show or radio show with Dennis McShane that you'd had £2 million in expenses, and if from the EU, and you'd use those that £2 million to fund your party. What's the truth behind that one first? Let's start there.
Yep, fine. Well, this was a debate I did with Dennis McShane, and he said, well, how much money have you had in expenses and allowances? And I've been there for 10 years, and I said my total expenses and allowances over 10 years must be about £2 million.
So you did say that?
Which is the same for every single MEP. That's what Glenys Kinnock gets, that's what I get, and what I wanted to do, John, we've been focusing on Westminster. Let's talk about what MEPs cost us, let's talk about what the EU costs. And the other point I made was that I have not used any of that money to line my own pockets. I have been the most active MEP for the last 10 years, travelling the length and breadth of this country, pushing not just the party, that wasn't the argument I made, but pushing the message, which is entirely within the rules.
So if you're that transparent then, let's have them all published on the internet now.
Well, that's
a fair point, isn't it?
It is, and let me answer it, because
of course.
This point was made in your newspaper this morning, and it's not quite right. It says that I have refused to say how I've spent my expenses and allowances. The biggest single allowance we get is the allowance to employ staff, and all of that is published up on the internet. All right? The one thing that I haven't published is the general expenditure allowance, which no British MEP for 30 years had published until a few months ago, and the other parties started to do it, and I've made a pledge that all UKIP MEPs from this election will do it, and I've called in...
Well, why don't you do it before?
Because there was no point in doing it. The others were doing it merely for electoral gain. Trying to show they were good boys, having not done it for 30 years. And the point I'm making, John, is we have got the biggest EU whistleblower, the accountant, Marta Andreasen, who is coming in and will make sure that from this election onwards that we get this 100% right. OK.
This is Nigel Farage. He's the leader of UKIP. We're just questioning him on this. Then we're going to go to Henry in London, John in Maidstone, Meg in Torquay, Chris in Portsmouth, and Margot as well in Kettering. Coming to you in a moment. If you've got a question for Nigel, he always speaks his mind. You might not agree with him. 020 33 64 7000. Let's go back to this article in today's newspaper then. It says, Mr Farage admitted he could not prove how he had spent his own expenses and allowances. You stand by that? You can't say?
I'm afraid that's just not quite right.
But have you said that's what it's about?
As I said, the biggest chunk of my allowances is the money I'm given to employ staff, and I published all of that last year. It's in the public domain, and incidentally, all of that is handled for me by a chartered accountant. I don't even see the money. OK,
and what about the line, the party refused to release details of how its MEPs had spent taxpayers' money when the Sun challenged it as part of our campaign against Eurofiddling? Did you refuse?
Every single UKIP MEP published last year details of how they spend most of their money. Not all of it, but most of it. All right? So
after this election, will you publish everything?
After this election, we're going to publish everything, and as I say, we're going to get Marta Andreasen to make sure we get it 100% right.
But it is true, you've got a terrible reputation as a party. 25% of them have been booted out, haven't they, of your MEPs? One went to prison for fraud.
Well, that happened. He was elected on our ticket, but he never took his seat for us, all right? He lied to us, he conned us. We've had trouble with 2 members, all right? And in both cases, John, without any debate, without any argument, we have said, you've broken faith with us and therefore you're gone. We've dealt with it ruthlessly. If the same was happening in Westminster, what would be happening next Thursday would be a rash of by-elections. 4
of your 12 will no longer take the whip. That's the truth, isn't it?
Well, again, you see, I'm afraid. I'm sorry.
No, you don't have to be sorry.
But the Sun's got this wrong. 2 we kicked out and we expelled.
Yeah.
1 was a former daytime TV presenter with a suntan who went off and did his own thing. But, your article here says Roger Natman has quit the party whip. Just not true.
He's still got the whip?
Yes, just not true. You know, he's still a member of the party, and it's just not true.
OK, now we started this campaign on Monday, of course, saying if you think the scandal in Westminster's bad, it's even worse in Brussels. Would you agree with George Pascoe-Watson, our political editor?
I have been saying that for 10 years. I've been trying to get this debated for 10 years, and no one up until now has wanted to listen, really.
Explain to me how much expenses you can pick up. A typical day or a typical week. Just explain to the British public what happens when you get on Eurostar.
Right, it's a completely different system to Westminster. That's the first thing to hook on board.
OK.
You are paid for every day you're in Brussels.
Right.
And you're paid not to work in the UK.
What?
So,
explain that to me. Run that one past me again.
OK.
This is Nigel Farage. We're coming to your calls in a moment. 020 33 64 7000. You're paid for being there and paid for not working in the UK.
Absolutely.
Go on.
Every MEP gets £3,500 a month paid direct into their bank account, and that is the general expenditure allowance. That is what is for spending in the United Kingdom.
Okay.
It covers running an office, political campaigns, it covers travel.
Secretary and all that.
No, not secretary. This is purely for you to spend yourself...
On the individual MEP.
Going about.
Got you.
If, and this has gone on for 30 years, if you don't have a UK office, if in fact you live in Brussels and never visit Britain, you're allowed to keep the whole lot.
Okay.
So the way to make money as an MEP is to go to Brussels, live in Brussels, sign on for your daily allowance.
Which is how much?
It's about €280 a day. Right. So sign on for that every single day.
When you sign on, you don't actually have to go inside and do any work, do you?
Oh, no, what happens is on Friday mornings, there is a queue when the office opens at 8 o'clock in the morning, and they go in, sign on for the day, and go straight to the airport.
Right, OK, carry on.
And that's been going on for
free
years.
as well, is it, the airfare?
The airfare, oh, you're more than compensated for the airfare.
What do you mean more than compensated?
Oh, they pay you, if you book a cheap ticket.
Is it true that if you get a 40 quid ticket, for example, from EasyJet or whatever, you can actually charge 200 or 300 quid the first class fare?
You are given a set of... that is actually changing.
Let me just clarify, though. You don't have to, like, you don't... Say if I went abroad, right?
Yeah.
And then the editor said to me, right, Gaunt, he gives you a receipt, you know, it'll be Graham Dudman or whatever. I give him the airfare, and it was 48 quid. He'd say, well done, Gaunt, you got a cheap seat. There's your 48 knicker back. He wouldn't say, oh, airfare to Brussels, I'll give you 500 quid.
I did this early in my parliamentary term. I went Ryanair to a small German airport and then got a taxi into Strasbourg, and the airfare cost me about 40 quid, and I was reimbursed 600 quid. Yeah, but I publicised all of that.
OK, and what did you do with the 560 then? Put it in your back pocket?
Spent it on pushing the campaign in this country. And in the early days, Gaunty, I gave cheques to charity.
How does it stop you not becoming a self-serving pig yourself then? And this then goes back to Westminster, I guess, as well. There's I keep calling this canteen culture. People say to me, why don't you stand for Parliament, Gaunty? The truth is, I'd be worried that I could sink into this.
I think...
Because it must be easy. You're out in Brussels, fancy a good boozer, and you drink like me. You fancy a nice big meal, you ain't paying for it. It's on the gravy tray.
Oh, no, I mean, that's absolutely right. And it is a lot of British MEPs have gone out to Brussels over the last 30 years as sceptics, but have become ever more a part of the system.
Native, so to speak, to use that old term.
But it hasn't happened to us in UKIP. We're there. We're not there to enrich ourselves. We're there because we want to sack all the MEPs. We want to save a lot more money and get us out.
You say not to enrich yourself, but they reckon if you're an MEP for a full term, you become a millionaire. So have you?
If you are dishonest about it.
So what have you done with your money?
If you live in Brussels and if you do nothing in the UK, I have been the hardest working British MEP every year for the last 10 years, all over the United Kingdom. Far from being better off as doing this, I'm much worse off 10 years on doing it.
Let's just go back then. So you get paid this money then for being over there. What else do you get then? You get all the X's without any receipts. Yeah?
Yes.
What else?
You get the allowance to employ staff, that's slightly separate. And there is another big allowance, which is called the information budget.
Oh, yeah, what's that?
Now, well, it's to use to print literature, to print leaflets, that kind of thing. And what MEPs tend to use it for, they use it to ensure they get re-elected.
OK. I'm going to stop there. I'm going to go straight to the calls.
OK.
And if you've got any question you want to ask Nigel Farage...
I mean, the big problem we've got, John, is that the expenses row is overtaking everything. What we should be talking about is the fact that we're giving £40 million a day of taxpayers' money to Brussels. What we should be talking about is the fact that as an EU member, we're not allowed to have our own immigration and asylum policy. What we should be talking about is the fact that our three parties in this country have lied to us consistently ever since the 1970s about the true nature of the European Union, and we need to have a big debate on those issues. But the one thing, John, where you're dead right, is some commentators say, oh, well, UKIP are getting these votes because it's a protest against the expenses scandal. Everybody forgets that we got 16% of the national vote in the last European elections, and that because we've had MEPs, and because, going back to Margot, you know, people like me have travelled the country making these arguments, we now have for the first time a clear majority of the British people that support us.
Okay.
To find out more about who we are and what we stand for, go to the UK Independence Party website at www.ukip.org.